Good afternoon, everybody. This is Stephen Werner. I'm the technical director at the historic Morton Theater. We're celebrating our 110th anniversary in operation. And today I have with me Mr. BK Jackson. This is our series, The Green Room at the Morton, where we bring to you audiovisual professionals that have been out there working in the industry for a while, and we just sit down and have a candid chat. So BK and I go way back. Welcome.
I'm floored and humbled to be here. I appreciate you having me here. It's great to have engineered and worked in this building, and now to be interviewed. It's an honor. So thank you for having me.
Cool. Yeah, it's awesome to me. It's kind of a surreal moment because I've had a chance to work with BK for a long time, and then he came and worked for me. So there's a lot of camaraderie in our business. But today I wanted you to talk a little bit about where you are now, where you have been, and we'll just start with the current. Like, tell me what you're currently doing right now. What title would you put on that work? And yeah, just kind of dive into it a little bit.
So I wear several hats. I'm coming off of being director of photography for Amazon Prime series with executive producer Jay Stiles out in California. The name of that series is called Become Inspired. It's on Amazon Prime right now, so go watch that.
Yeah,
season 2.
Yeah,
season 2. And season 2 is the season that I'm the cinematographer for. So I'm coming off of that. I'm also working as operations manager at PSAV in Atlanta. Love
Nice.
that PSAV team. Obviously, through current situation with what's going on in the world, business has been slow there. So I've been very blessed to be able to do other things, working as a multimedia consultant with various companies. In fact, I'm a contractor for several companies through my own brand, bkoriginal.com. So I'm doing that with several different companies, a lot of litigation contracts, a lot of audiovisual needs and production needs there. And then, of course, I got my own brand with bkoriginal.com. We're producing cooking shows, which is something that we didn't think that we'd ever be doing. But everything that's been going on in the world has given us time to reflect on what our other talents are. So I've been able to flex my cooking talent with the Cookin' It Right brand that I've built with my wife. Shout out to Rachel. And we're 20 episodes into one of our new series called What Y'all Cookin'. It's available on Facebook Watch and on YouTube right now.
Man, you got a lot of irons in the fire, bro.
Got to stay busy, man.
That's right. And I've had the pleasure. You put me on to some of the Amazon original stuff. That's really inspiring stuff. And then, the Cookin' It Right stuff. Man, your first episode, you had me hooked because you cooked one of my favorite Southern dishes, fried chicken. And you even surprised me today.
I brought you some fried chicken. We'll roll some B-roll of that.
That's
but
cool.
I cooked them when he was talking about me coming up here. He had mentioned he hadn't had any really. He had fried chicken, but he hadn't had some buttermilk, fried chicken with some spiciness in there. So I whipped it up homemade for him. So definitely y'all can jump into that after the interview. Yeah,
that's cool, man. Well, so you hit on a lot of stuff, and I like the aspect that you had right there is that you're a perfect example of somebody who's working currently in a position. You got your position with PSAV, but that's not the only thing that you got going on. You're working out on other people's projects, and you're working on your own creative content. So I'm just going to go back and just hone in on the
Absolutely.
PSAV for a second. So how long have you been in that particular position?
In the industry of corporate audiovisual, I've been in that industry for about 24 years, working with the PSAV brand specifically for about 2.5 years.
That's right. And are you located at a particular property? I know, like, coming out of that world too, that PSAV and other companies,
yes,
they get a contract in like a hotel or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely doing a lot of work with the contracting of the hotels and managing their brands in various hotels and things like that, yes.
Cool. And I know that's where you and I kind of connected. We were working for a particular company, and then I was actually in the warehouse doing the lighting department, and then you would come in, pick up some orders, and we got talking, and then I stepped out and started freelancing with you. But yeah, we did a lot of stuff. Talk to me a little bit about what do you, and I'm kind of going off my script here a little bit, but
go
just freelancing a little bit. corporate AV has its own uniqueness to it.
Yep.
So, you talked a little bit about the things you were doing in the professional video world. What things are different? Like, I know some of those skill sets carry over, but corporate AV can be a labyrinth, and you're getting in there, you're working with CEOs as your talent versus, musical artists. So kind of talk to me a little bit about that world.
Yeah, and I'll even go back a little bit further, just kind of how I even came into the business, and that'll kind of help you kind of see my personal philosophy on it and how I approach it. I started off 15, 16 years old, being lucky enough to grow up in Dallas, Texas, and just through happenstance, I was going to a mega church, and the person who was in charge of that mega church was Bishop T.D. Jakes, who is a televangelist even now, and he had bought that property from another company. He had brought that church from another church. I believe it was Eagle's Nest, and then it became the Potter's House. So my grandmother told me, she was in the choir there, and she really believed in being active in the ministry. So she said, okay, you got to do something in the ministry at the church, because I have to be at church for all of the choir and stuff. So the easiest way for you to not be bored when you're waiting for me to get out of these things is to do something at church. And I was already doing a lot of choir stuff at school, so I didn't want to get too much into having to learn other repertoire and stuff like that. So I saw that they had openings in the camera ministry. And it's weird that, back then we called it a camera ministry, because that's what it was. You volunteered to help out with it. And then I had the extreme fortune in being blessed to watch it grow from this small department to being a full-fledged on TV thing. I mean, by the time I left that church and going to, because I left because I was graduating and going to college, and I was moving on to Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia, which was going to be obviously I wouldn't be able to go to church every weekend because that's a matriculation to a whole nother state. But, I was able to watch that go from this. I started as a grip and gaffer, and just handling the reels of cable for the camera ops back then. And you still kind of do it today, but we had triax cable that would plug into the back of the camera. And so somebody had to coil that. So that was all my jobs. I learned over and under cabling. That's what I started. That's all I was allowed to do. You coil over, coil under, don't touch anything. Then they let me gaff. Then they let me be in charge of, being on a camera. So by the time I left it, I actually was able to work all of the different cams in the building. And I still never even, at a young age, didn't even see that as a trade. It was just something I did to keep my grandmother from yelling at me and not being useful at church. So, working 3 services, we went from going to 1 service a Sunday to going to 3 services, and then going to the night service, and then every Wednesday. So it was like a job, but I didn't understand that. And so when I got to college, I went for music. Well, the way I paid my bills is doing audiovisual stuff on the side. And I got a reputation in the area for being a wizard with different, audiovisual things. And again, I still didn't even see it. I just saw it as a little side thing. Mm-hmm. And as I got deeper and deeper into college and working with different types of people, I realized, wait, I can make more money doing this than like teaching music. I think I might go into audiovisual. And I really got a passion for it. And through working that way, I ended up working at my first convention center when I lived in Columbus. And that's when I started really working with different types of people. When you work in a convention center, you work with, one day you can be working with a CEO. One day you could be working with the military, especially working down in Columbus, Georgia, near Fort Benning. Another day you could be working with a teachers association. Another day you could be working with a bunch of moms. You could be working with all kinds of types of people coming from different walks of life. And so in my early 20s, having that experience, I learned that what was going to get me ahead wasn't the technical knowledge. I had to get the technical knowledge nailed down so that I could do my job. But what made me, and I started winning like awards and things. And what I noticed when I looked at my other peers doing what we did, what put me ahead of them was a smile and knowing how to give great service and helping, most people believe in the golden rule that, treat people the way you want to be treated. But I'd like to quote Brian K. Williams, who I met through He was a trainer with Ritz Carlton and their customer service. He taught me. He said, "BK, the real golden rule is treat people the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated." And when you understand that each person has something that they're trying to accomplish, when they come to you, you'll understand that they're not buying technology, they're not renting your knowledge. That's going to be a consequential part of that, an unintended consequence, if you will. But understanding when you meet somebody, what does the CEO want from me? What does this lawyer want from me? What is it they're trying to get out of me? And when you can understand what that thing is, you can focus on giving them that experience and that feeling, and the technical knowledge just becomes secondary to it. So
It's the pathway.
It's why it's important that you work with well-trained technicians and that you don't work in only one thing. It's the reason why when you hear me talk about the different positions, I've learned through multiple times in my life that you need to have multiple streams of income, but you also had to have multiple streams of networking. You never know when a pandemic is going to hit and now the corporate field is going to dry up. If I was only working that part of my competence and I only worked that part of my networking, I'd have been out of luck. Because I worked the litigation field and because I worked the cinema field and all of those other things, it gave me some other things to do. And it's what encouraged me to even venture into cooking, because I said, this is another opportunity that I didn't really see. It really encouraged me to jump out on faith and try harder.
You brought up your experience there at the church, and I think that's really, really interesting. Like the couple of observations I made, and I want you to clarify for a little bit, because you used some very technical words in there. When you said that you were a grip and a gaffer, and you differentiated those two things. Like I want, especially young people come up in the field, to know there was a time when you were serving on this ministry, and like all you were allowed to do was touch the cable. And then taping the cable down before you ever got a chance to get behind the camera. And I think a lot of times, I think it's good to have that goal. Like, hey, eventually I see myself behind that soundboard, behind that camera, but it's a process. And all the steps are important.
It's important. You bring up a really good point. Technology is so ubiquitous now. I remember when 360D technology came out for cameras. And I remember when the DVX100B camera came out with Panasonic. It was a game changer, but it was still on digital tape, But even then, it was a game changer because it wasn't, you mean to tell me I can take video and run it through a FireWire port card and import it, and I don't have to do reel-to-reel editing anymore? Nonlinear video editing? Like it was, I remember when the world was changing, and the world is going to continue to change because technology is its own steroid. So to be working in our field, you're literally working in the very thing that is excelling and exponentially growing the world at large. So the unintended consequence that comes with that is that younger people don't understand like what it meant to be able to, like, you can get a tripod and a camera and a lighting kit and all the grip that you need with it for less than $1,000.
Yeah.
For less than $1,000, you can start a studio in your own house.
It's insane.
You don't even need a cyc wall. You can go to Daylight and buy the backdrop paper for probably about 100, maybe $78. You can get a roll of white seamless in your house and set up your own cyc wall, and you have it. Like when we were coming up, you didn't have that. Like the access to gear, there was no Amazon. Like B&H, you had to go to New York where B&H was, Wolf Camera ran things. These are a lot of these places don't even exist anymore. Circuit City, so my point is that when I was being trained in the audiovisual world, you were not allowed to touch much because equipment was not as replaceable as it is now.
Exactly.
You broke something, you didn't buy another one. You sent it off for repairs and you didn't know when it was coming back.
Yeah.
And
Good point.
and now if you break a speaker, You blow one out, you just buy another one, and Amazon Prime will have it delivered in 2 days. So even that's so different than what we were used to. So it's I think I used the term unintended consequence earlier because I want people to understand, like, if you're a young person watching this, what you may not understand is you have access to the equipment, but because you have access to the equipment, your training needs to move just as quickly as the equipment does. You can have gear that's with you that you may not even know how to properly use. So it's important that you really take time to train yourself on your own time. Appreciate the opportunity to segment your knowledge so that you can take pieces, because the blessing of being able to start as just like a grip and then move up is that I'm never intimidated by new technology. When I heard about flying speakers and doing a line array, most people hear that and they go, I can't do that. But for me, I just know it's a means to understanding one step toward the next thing. As long as I understand power, I can hook up a line array, because that's the biggest part of it, is getting it up there, getting it powered. And then from there, it's just about understanding how to work the console, how to dial in the angles of your speakers. And it's something that I very much remember at one time being intimidated of, but understanding that if I can just learn this part of it, then I can learn the next part. And if I can learn the next part, then I can learn the next piece. So
Mastering by steps.
yeah, mastery by steps, and understanding that you got to create a roadmap in your mind, so that you can be fearless with your pursuits.
Yeah, and you talked about your training and education, and the thing that I look back on in my own experiences, and I think this is similar in your experience as well, is you have different pockets of education and training. Some of it is very formal. You mentioned about going to school, but yet you had set yourself up with those years at the church even before you got there. I didn't get into tech until I got into college. I was also a music student, and I saw technology as a means to an end. So talk to me a little bit about the roles that, like, formal education and also informal education or self-guided education has played in your development.
So that's a big one, because that's where we are now. For the last 20 years, this has been the conversation: is what does formal education mean anymore?
Yeah.
What does certifications mean anymore? And I'll answer it in terms of, I think there's a place for all of it. It all depends on the confidence and the competence of the person who's going to be the student. Some people need a lot of certification to get that level of confidence and competence with something. And competence and confidence have to be hand in hand, because you can be incredibly confident with hanging. Let's go back to the line array conversation. You can be incredibly confident with hanging that line array, but if you don't have the competence to do it, it will fall out of the sky because you don't know what you're doing.
People will get hurt.
And people get hurt, and people get sued, and people get fired. And then they realize you were just overconfident. You didn't really know what you're talking about. Your competence has to be tied to that. So you have to be able to really understand and ascertain what's being asked of you, but you have to trust yourself enough to then go and do it. And there's a lot of people out here who are incredibly competent, but aren't confident enough to get out there. So I think, again, education has a place in giving people a sense of security in the knowledge and really helping them feel like they understand what that is. At the same time, for those of us out here, and I say us because I started out going to college, and I attended college for about 5 years. And I got to my last year and I got a job offer making more money than I ever thought I'd be making in this field. And I had a choice to make. I could stay and finish my education, or I could go and get busy living and doing what we're trying to do. And I was lucky to have a mentor, Richard Baxter at Clemson State University, that said, it's my job to tell you to finish your education, but you know that you came to this school to get that job, and you got that job.
Wow.
So what's the point of getting the education if you pass up the dream job? So I was lucky to have a mentor who said, you can always come back and get the education if you need it. And Columbia State University has been really good. They've come back and given me multiple opportunities to finish the education, but I haven't had a need to, because the world is moving so fast and the education can't keep up with where the trends are going. The stuff that they're using to your team is using to even film this, 10 years ago, people would have said it was impossible. And
Right.
here we are with it. And not only that, but it's getting incrementally more inexpensive. So for those of us that are fearless, all you have to do is go to YouTube and have an imagination. And you can
You hit
get
the magic word.
trained on anything. If you're watching someone break the fourth wall, anything you want to know how to do is at your fingertips. You pull your cell phone out and you get out there and do it. The thing is in a college, somebody's going to be cracking the whip telling you to get after it. In the real world, there's no one telling you to do that. Your competition is going to drive themselves. And so if you want to compete, you gotta grow a voice inside of yourself that tells you to get up every morning and brush your teeth, even when we're in day 68 of the pandemic. Get out there, get your workout in, get your steps in, and get busy living, man, because your knowledge is dying every single day, because everything is growing and changing. And as soon as you are for sure about something, it's changed. I mean, and I also surround myself with people who are just as driven as I am. My wife, who's in the business, one of my best friends, James, and one of my other best friends, Jeffrey, we sat one night and had a debate about 4K video editing for another friend of ours who was looking for recommendations on a computer. And the four of us on a phone call were arguing over which is best. Is it better to get an Alienware, gaming laptop, or is it better to go with a Mac? And what's the pros and cons? And was Mac workflow better? And was a PC workflow better? And Asus is doing this with things. And have you seen the new Asus? So again, it's all about who you surround yourself and creating an ecosystem that is going in the direction that you're trying to go with. So again, university creates that ecosystem for you. The library, the media centers that are there, the people that you're going to go to class with. That's what university is great at. It's great at, you pay money to allow yourself to be in a conservatory of sorts, with like-minded individuals, and the natural competition that happens between human beings is going to come out within that. So you can pay money to do that, or you can smarten up and figure out a way to create that for yourself. And the younger you are, the harder that is to do. When we were that young, we didn't know what we were talking about. If we knew this then, it would be a whole nother story now. So I understand why young people want to go to a university, because, you're with your parents. They don't know what AV is. Some of them, a lot of us aren't lucky to have, like one of the guys filming this, he's lucky to have a family he's pedigreed, and he's lucky. And I think that's the reason why he's so great. He got a good start. But for some of us that, our families had no idea what we were even talking about doing.
Oh, so man, it was like Greek. I go home and talk to my parents, and I can remember, I was a fairly decent student at high school, and, it was a different world. And my parents, didn't have opportunities to go to college. It wasn't necessary to go to college to get a good job. And they were very supportive, and I had been in music my whole life. And I said, I want to go study music. I want to be a songwriter. And I just remembered that pragmatism came into view. And my dad and my mom both being hardworking but very intelligent people, they said, look, son, you gotta have a game plan. We love you, but you can't live with us forever. And so AV kind of fell into my lap as that practical thing that I could really get my hands on. And it was going to be a means to an end. But then I fell down the rabbit hole with it. But again, there were a lot of conversations where it's just like, now explain to me why you need this class. And I look back now, and I think you really brought up a good point. And I've struggled how to, as we're mentoring some folks here coming out of university programs and helping them grow. The internships I had were invaluable. I think they should be a part of every educational process, whether they come through a university or not. in raising two kids and seeing one go in the military and one who's an incredibly great visual artist. And I hesitate when I counsel her and I go, am I really telling my kid not to go to college? But then I look at people like yourself and other people who've been successful, and it's like what drives you is the need to know and to do and to be creative. And like you talked about the competence and confidence. I think for me, college became my path to both.
Yes.
Like I was becoming competent, but it wasn't probably till that fourth year, and Asher and I talked about this, about year 3 or 4, until you really go, hey, I think I might be able to do this. Like I might be able to make a living at this. I didn't have that big call come, for a big job until after I got out of college. But it took years to develop the confidence to match the competence. And we were talking earlier about how, a lot of times, we're seeking the job for the person to work for them and not realizing really all that we can really bring to the table. Like
Yes.
we've been trained to be humble, and that's a good thing to keep our skill set in perspective. But then sometimes I call it bringing all the guns to bear.
Yes.
And when you come and you sit down at the table and realize that, man, I really have something to offer these people. And by the time we're done with this conversation, whether I get this job or this gig or not, they're going to know what I can do. Yeah. And they're either going to be happy to hire me, or they're going to regret that they didn't. Yeah. And you got to have a little bit of that.
You do.
Talk about that little that killer instinct that Mike Tyson
the thing
thing.
is, you got to have hunger is important for young people. Really, hunger is important for all human beings. It's important that you have adversity face you, because it's in, we talked about confidence meeting competence. Okay. So you spend all this time learning and becoming competent at what you're doing. What typically drives you to have to up your confidence is when you need that job. I remember being in college and, meeting my wife along the way. And at a certain point, I had to choose between keeping a camera and buying her a ring. And so I got really smart at how to figure out budgets, because I was lucky enough to be a multimedia production manager at that time. And our year-end budget was coming up. And so I was like, okay, I need to buy this ring. All right. I don't have the money because I'm terrible at saving money, because at that age, I was really terrible at saving money. Okay. So, okay, what can I do? Okay. Well, with our wish budget at the end of the year, our wish list, I was able to recommend the camera that I actually currently had. And I was using it for work there anyway. So it wasn't like it was bad to recommend that camera, but I was like, I'm using this for work anyway. I can get them to buy that camera, and then I can sell this camera off and then be able to do that. But then I wanted to be able to buy my own gear. So that's when the job offer came up, because I was looking for opportunities to extend things, because again, hunger pushes you to say, you know what, I really enjoy where I'm at right now, but there's some things that I aspire to do. And if I'm going to be able to do those things, I got to get to the next level with it. And so it pushes you to look for opportunities that you never thought were possible before. So you got to push yourself. You got to put yourself in an opportunity to not be comfortable all the time. We're very human beings. Your body is made to want to stay in comfort at all times. And as a result, it's easy to get in a situation where you're working a job and 5 years later you're doing the same thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're fine with that, that's fine. But what's going to really push you to grow is putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, putting yourself in a new, it was clearly uncomfortable for me to move from Dallas, Texas, all the way to Georgia at a younger age, and then when I finally first got that job, to move from Georgia to New York City and having to thrive there and work there, that was hard. And getting used to different pacing and ways of doing things, and, but putting myself in uncomfortable situations every single time made me a more eloquent human being. And not just in my trade. It it changed my palate. The way I taste food is different. The way I wear my clothes is different. The way I wear my hair is different. In my mid 20s, I used to shave my head all the time. Now in my mid to late 30s, I can't even imagine cutting my hair. So it changes you as a person to put yourself through adversity and to overcome it. And when you overcome it, that's where the confidence grows. You really start to understand that the experience that you needed came 2 minutes after you needed it. And so only through putting yourself through the fire can you understand how to extinguish that thing and conquer it. So definitely put yourself in a situation, you'll see the eye of the tiger come out.
Yeah, I think competence and confidence dwell symbiotically. I was in a similar situation coming out of school, graduating. I mean, my world went from I graduated in August. I put a ring on my wife's finger in October. Had a job in November. Bought a house in December.
Yep.
And first child on the way after that. By the
See?
time I was in my mid-20s, I was helping to run a multi-million-dollar concert hall, and I had regularly, in those first 3 years in the industry, I had 21 Grammy winners riding in my car. But the thing was, I had no room for failure. And, there were people who were dependent on me.
Yep.
I was dependent on me. I remember going to that first job interview. I was working for the State Department of Labor. It was a decent job, but I had no context for how to train people how to find a job, because I was literally, I had a friend who had worked there and they recommended me, and I had no experience. I got the job. Now I had a big personality and that helped.
Yeah.
But then my wife always pushing me a little bit, never in a like, hey, you better than this, but just, hey, I know this is your dream. You studied this, go after it. So she's going to school at Clayton State. She says, hey, there's an opening for assistant production manager at Spivey Hall. I'd grown up in that side of town. I knew the reputation of that place. I'm like, they don't want a young kid like me working there. I'm like,
so your confidence was low.
Yeah, I was 26 years old, but I put my resume in anyway, got a half day off. She rode with me, took a book with her. She said, hey, I'm going to sit in the car. I did the old school thing because parents taught me. You walk in there, you shake their hand, you look them in the eye, you hand them that piece of paper, the whole thing. I was in there. I told her, I said, I'll be in there 15 minutes. I was in there 3.5 hours.
That's a good sign, man.
3.5 hours of talking with the guy who became my boss. I only found out later, about 4 years after that, when I was getting ready to transition. And I said, hey, Robert, will you write me a recommendation letter? And he said, yeah. And so I he had me digging through his files for something. I came across this folder, and it was stacks of resumes of people he had passed over. Every one of those people had exponentially more experience. But what he did is he took a chance on me. And that was my place where I cut my teeth. And I made some supremo mistakes on really big stages. I can remember, getting overzealous, wiring the sound system in a certain way that it didn't show up immediately what I had done. And we had an artist on stage from Columbia Artists, one of the best cello players in the world, and it crashed.
Oh, man.
And my boss was there. I was off that night. I had to write a formal letter. Not only did I get reprimanded, not only did I have to write that thing and put it in my personnel file, I'm writing a letter to the rep at Columbia Artists. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying, I got overzealous. I'm sorry. That was such a huge learning curve for me. My boss could have fired me on the spot because of what it cost him in terms of reputation. He pulled me to the side and he admonished me in a way that built me up. Yeah. And he said, look, I really love that you take initiative and you were going after it. Yeah, things needed to change. Just do one thing for me. Come and talk to me first, because something may look wrong to you in the context in which you're looking at, but it may be wired up in a way that it needs to accomplish a very specific thing that you're not aware of in the moment. And that was such a potentially confidence draining moment. And I look back on that, 22 years ago, And I go, that was the moment where I really began to find myself as a professional.
Well, and it's funny you touched on so many things in there, and I just want to dissect that for a second because you pulled out something that we already touched on, and it's so important to reinforce because the most important technology that you're ever going to operate and own is this here.
Yeah.
And so often we're looking for these things that we need to augment our skill set and our kit from without. So we're always on Google or on Amazon looking for that next piece of kit that we need, not understanding that the most important technology you need to work on is this. So mental health is important because not only do you need to be able to critically think and be able to operate and do things at the right time, but you also need to be able to make the right chess moves career-wise and as a technician. And so it's important that you do things to reinforce an environment and an ecosystem of good mental health. So for example, you mentioned like your wife, you didn't have the confidence to apply for that job, but surrounding yourself with someone who loved you, she encouraged you not to push you to be boastful. And she didn't even ask you to do it to push you. She did it because she could tell that you undervalued yourself. And she saw something just as a casual observer saying, you could do that job. And so there's different people that you could put into your life that can fill that role. Best friends, colleagues, people, even down to your boss that you talked about. There's many ways that he could have handled things. He could have hired somebody who knew more than you and probably would have given him a tongue lashing in terms of, well, I'm not doing that and I am going to do that. There's an advantage to putting someone who's slightly underexperienced in because they're malleable. You can work with them and you can partner with them. Sometimes older audiovisual people, because this is not just for younger people. This is for some of you guys watching too. Some older people that I've interviewed for positions before. I've been an operations manager. I've been a director of audiovisual, and again, I've been a director of photography. And some people that I don't want on my set or don't want on my team is because they know too much already. I can't teach someone whose glass is already filled. Sometimes I'd rather take that inexperienced guy because let's be honest, hooking up cables for a mixing console ain't that hard. You just got to be able to follow directions and do it repeatedly the same way every single time, like I told you to that first time, and don't deviate. But you understand that sometimes you're going to end up as a leader, you're going to end up where your squire, fails you. And so again, having people like your wife, having a good leader in your life like that boss at that time, these people enabled you to grow into who you were going to become. And now look at you, you're a technical director, and I'm sure there's guys all the time making the same mistakes you made. But you got to surround yourself with a great ecosystem. So mental health is incredibly important in the game. The best poker players in the world, the best ultimate fighters from UFC, the number one thing that'll destroy a champion is poor mental health. Yeah. If you crack under pressure, you can't survive. So again, think about all the things that we've been talking about. The technology we're talking about is personality. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about mental fortitude. We're talking about understanding how to work with different types of people and understanding that you're not selling the technology. You're selling an experience that is going to be leveraged by the technology. So until you understand what your product is and understand what you're trying to accomplish. I used to be a leader who was not the right type of leader for people because I was a young leader and I'd been taught by bad leadership. And I didn't understand that it's not just about getting the end results. It's about making sure that everyone on your team feels good about what they're doing and understands the value of what they're doing. When a person self-appraisal is hard. So when you can have a leader who can appraise your value and help you understand why you're here and what they appreciate about you, you'll go over many mountains for them. And you'll do it for minimum wage if you can get that feeling every single day that, like, this person actually cares. And it's an aspirational thing. Some days we're human beings, some days as leaders we fail, but I'm happy to know that I have good leadership these days, and I won't work for a company that doesn't have great leadership. You can feel it in the interview.
There you go. You touched on a lot of stuff there, but I always tell young people, especially, when you're walking in to an interview, you're not just being interviewed, you are interviewing.
Pro tip. That's a major pro tip you just gave. Say it one more time.
A lot of times you feel like you're in a power play. Like this person, this company, this boss has something that I want, and I'm only going to get it if they say yes.
And I am but the meager pauper,
Yeah.
begging you for alms. Like that is when you're young and you're interviewing, you feel like you're begging for a job, and you feel like you're the scum of the earth, and I'm not qualified enough. And
But
man, if I
if
could
you
just
made
get
it
this
to
job,
that table, you are already a leg up.
Yeah.
You don't even realize that when
Exactly.
you walk in the door,
they wouldn't have called you if you weren't qualified.
yeah, you've already passed the biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
Now all you have to do is I look at everything. I remember one time I applied at this